Good day, everybody, and welcome to day 26 of the Bible in the year 2021. And we're looking at Genesis 41 to 42. And there's some things here that we're going to notice more about Joseph, but also the way that God interacts and he interacts with this world. And we're gonna see that there's a change. There's been a shift that's happened where he was it seemed more direct, more open, more visitations and such with the earlier generation. But at this current time, he seems to have hidden that, and he has a different way of communicating. So, in Genesis 41, what we see here is God speaking to Pharaoh. Um, if we consider the Bible in its entirety, if we look at the whole thing, and we consider all the different leaders and all the interactions and everything that's going on, um, we see that this happens quite often, and it's with kings like Nebuchadnezzar. Okay, so here it's happening with Pharaoh. Happens with Nebuchadnezzar. It happens with different leaders, where God gives visions or dreams, or but He's communicating to them. The thing is that these leaders can't understand it, and the sages that they have around them, the wise people, the spiritualists and such, they can't understand it because these things have to be, they have to be spiritually discerned to understand, and that discernment has been given to God's God's people. Um, so we need we have to understand that those who are put into leadership, they're kind of a different breed. They have huge responsibilities, and God is involved with them, whether they're saved or not. And that may be hard for us to fully understand, but they can't hear Him. And they can't understand because it's more like a noise that's all around them, but He is speaking to them. And that's why we need to be as close as we can to them. We need to pray in advisors, spiritual advisors around them, people who are tuned into the kingdom of God, who can interpret these things for these leaders, so that they can hear the voice of God and the wisdom and the direction and the warnings that He gives about impending disasters and their preparation in it. And we may wonder, especially as we go through this COVID, has were the Christians too withdrawn? Were they not involved with this? Were they not paying attention? Did they not understand the responsibility? Were they not hearing the word? Uh, because from what I can see, quite often God speaks directly to these leaders. It's these leaders who experience a dream. It's not somebody showing up and said, "I had a dream," or "God said to me," but it's them being spoken to directly. But it's a foreign language they're not understanding, and they need an interpreter, and we are the interpreters. Maybe not you and me. Maybe we're not in that circle, but those those of our family need to be there to help these leaders understand. So we shouldn't be distancing ourselves from the leaders. We shouldn't be seeing ourselves on one side of the fence and they're on the other. We shouldn't be seeing them as the enemy at all. We should be seeing our responsibility, as the Bible tells us, to lift them up, to encourage them, to seek their success, to pray for them, and so that they are open to having one of the family around them, so that they can advise them on what God is communicating. We got a long way to go to get back to there. Think of a Billy Graham. Just think of a Billy Graham who definitely would not have been in agreement with some of the presidents that he walked with, but he still walked with them, and he was still there, and they trusted his advice. They trusted him. They sought out his counsel, because he was for them. He wasn't against them. He didn't set them up as an enemy. They were leaders, which meant that God had them there in that place, even if we don't understand it, and they needed the good counsel of God's children around them. So just keep that in mind as we go forward. And yeah, remember, we've come across a lot of scripture recently about positions of humility, and that's where we need to be if we want to be used by God, if we want to be in positions where we get to speak into people's lives, and then we have to be in a position of humility. People don't want our opinion. They don't want to know how we see things. What they need is the voice of God. And so we have to get out of the way, and we have to be humble, and we have to admit that we don't know enough to make any judgments whatsoever. But God knows all things, and we need to be there and available for His voice to come through. And that's this we find here in verse 16. Joseph answered Pharaoh, "It's not me. God will give Pharaoh a favorable response. Make sure that you're not taking the credit for what God is doing." And people say, "Yeah, but I thank you for being available." Okay, that's fine. Okay, I can accept that. My part was being available, but what you received, you give praise and glory to God, because it is from Him. It's not from me. Verse 25. You got to wonder, how much is he speaking to the world leadership? How much is he speaking and it's just being ignored? Joseph said to Pharaoh, "Pharaoh has actually had one dream. God has announced to Pharaoh what he is about to do." How many heads ups has the Lord given that leaders don't know enough to even ask, or they don't have anybody around them to ask? And we see this as a pattern. It's not a one-off thing. It's a pattern that we see here on God, because all of humanity belongs to God. All of it belongs to God. All leadership is His responsibility. He deals with those leaders. He lifts them up. He tears them down. That's what the Word tells us. And we need to be. Instead of standing in a place of morality and shouting at these people who are not behaving in ways that um, we think is proper, we need to be listening to what Dad wants us to say. If we're in a position of any any kind whatsoever to say anything, um, if we're on the other side of the world, us ranting and raving on the internet is not really going to be of much use whatsoever. Um, so in verse 32, this is what Joseph says: "The dream occurred to Pharaoh twice because God has determined to do it, and God will make it happen soon." So we've often said that when you read something repeated 3 times in the Word, that's God underlining, bolding it, and putting those exclamation marks. And here Joseph has learned from his involvement with receiving dreams that if it's repeated, if that dream is repeated, then the God is saying that, like He's determined, this is what's going to happen, and it's going to happen soon. So does that mean if He gives you one dream, that's a possibility of what's happening? But if you get it twice, then this is a definite, and it's going to happen soon. Just remember that Joseph received his dream twice about being in a position of authority and his family bowing down to him. Um, so, like, yeah, it's God was determined to do it, and look what He did to get Joseph into position. He took Joseph through some really stressful, terrible times, but it was to this end. It was to get him into this place. So, we've already mentioned. I think it was yesterday they were mentioning that, or maybe it's coming up. Could be coming in. No, I think we've already mentioned it. Sorry, sometimes these things just flow together for me. Joseph doesn't have any face-to-face encounters. He doesn't have any encounters with angels. God at this moment is speaking to everybody with dreams. Jacob has had all kinds of encounters, tons of encounters, but his sons don't seem to be having encounters. But Joseph just operates in this land of dreams, and so he gives us interpretation because this is how God is speaking to him, and Joseph is in tune with him. So he is also able, because he's in tune with him, he's also able to understand the dreams that God is communicating to other people. And so we just reading here in verse 33 to 36, I just appreciate the fact that interpretation is given, but in this case with Joseph, wise counsel has also been given to him. Joseph speaks out, and he doesn't say that God said, but this is the wisdom that has been given to Joseph to tell Pharaoh what to do. And so he has here now, Pharaoh should find an intelligent, wise man and give him authority over the land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh should appoint administrators over the land and take 1/5 of all the produce of the land of Egypt during the 7 years of abundance. During the good years that are coming, they should collect all such food and store the grain under Pharaoh's control, protecting the food in the cities. This food will be reserved for the 7 years of famine to follow in the land of Egypt, so that the land won't be ravaged by the famine. So there you go, wise counsel there. Now, and aside from this, what I was wondering as I was reading the full thing through, in seeing what they end up doing with this produce that they collected, I wonder if did they buy this, or was it taxed? Or did they say to the people, bad things are coming, so we need you to make these deposits for the future? The problem being, if they bought it, okay, that's all in good. If it was a tax, well, that's kind of a little different. And if it was volunteer, then what happened was really, really deplorable, because they sold it. They sold it. Now, I could understand them selling it to people who came from outside of Egypt, right? But for the Egyptians, shouldn't it have been free? But it wasn't. They sold it to them. So it doesn't mention here. That's one of those things that's just not mentioned here. We don't know if there was compensation for this, or if it was a tax, or what happened. But they collected 1/5 of everything that was produced. Now, this seems a little weird to me. Let's just consider it for a second. Okay, Genesis 41:38. It sounds good, but I want to point something out. Can we find a man more God with more God-given gifts than this one? This is Pharaoh speaking to his council. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has made all this known to you, no one is as intelligent and wise as you are. You will be in charge of my kingdom, and all my people will obey your command. Only as the enthroned king will I be greater than you. Now, here's what's so weird. Okay, it's really weird. Joseph just came out of jail. He was in jail because he was accused, although he was never given a trial. But I mean, why would you put a slave on trial, right? So here he is, a slave. He was accused of attacking an Egyptian woman, an official's wife, in jail. He just comes out of jail. He's been in the presence of Pharaoh for maybe half an hour, and Pharaoh, without knowing him, puts him in charge of all of Egypt. Doesn't that just strike you a little weird? The only thing I can credit to, it doesn't come right out and say this, but if we follow the pattern, we see that he had Pharaoh, or he had favor with his master, because the Lord gave him favor. The Lord made the master's heart tender towards Joseph. There was the same thing with the jailer. He there was favor there, yes, but he provoked the jailer to be kind towards him, to trust him. It was the jailer. It comes right out and says that God did this. It wasn't because of Joseph. It was because God did this. And so I'm going to assume here it's the same pattern. We've got the same pattern here, where it's actually God who provokes Pharaoh. It's God who puts favor for Joseph on Pharaoh, so that Pharaoh just turned around and liked Joseph, trusted Joseph, and put Joseph into this position. But for me, I mean, looking at it from just this world's point of view, this is just weird, and we have to. I've got to assume that God was following the pattern of causing favor for Joseph so that he could be in this position, because that was the plan. Look at this, okay? It's not just the fact that he didn't know him. Look at his age. Joseph was in verse 46. Joseph was 30 years old when he began to serve Pharaoh. 30 years old. Egypt's king when he left Pharaoh's court and traveled through the entire land of Egypt. Considering how old people were living, at least how old the Hebrews were living too. Isaac lived, what was he, 180, 185? 30, like you're barely getting out of diapers. And here Pharaoh puts Joseph in charge at 30 years old. I think not only is it the favor of God, but I also think it speaks well of Joseph's humility before God, and the fact that God has equipped him and is providing him the wisdom that he needs. I think later on we're going to see that the wheels fell off the cart for Joseph, just like it did with Solomon. Just because we've been given these things, because we're gifted this way, because we have favor, it doesn't mean that we can afford to forget God. It doesn't mean that we can afford to allow that relationship to wane at all. And so later on, I'll point that out to you. I hope I'll remember to point that out to you, where the wheels came off the cart. But for this moment, Joseph is just, he's gifted with this wisdom and the leadership. Really, it's leadership that he has here. And then he encounters his brothers. Genesis 42, verse 7 to 8. He encounters his brothers. The test begins, because this is what it is. Joseph sees his brothers, and I don't know if it's conscious or subconscious, but he really puts them through a test to see if they've changed. These brothers did not rally to protect him. These brothers did not have patience with him. These brothers sold him. They lied to his father. Just terrible. They didn't know how to love. They didn't know what family meant whatsoever. And so we read here, when Joseph saw his brothers, he recognized them, but he acted like he didn't know them. He spoke to them with a harsh tone and said, "Where have you come from?" And they said, "From the land of Canaan, to buy food." Joseph recognized his brothers, but they didn't recognize him. Why would they? He's been eaten. No, they sold. That's right. So they said he was eaten. Sold. So I mean, they would never expect that their brother who was sold as a slave would ever be sitting and ruling over Egypt, right? So why would they expect to see him there? And then we see that really it's a fulfillment of the dream that Joseph had. That he was scoffed for and hated for, and that his brothers really sold him into slavery because of. And here they are, part of this fulfillment of the dream that God had given to him. Joseph remembered the dreams he had dreamed about them and said to them, "You are spies. You've come to look for the country's weaknesses." Yeah, so I mean, I think that gave him a little more boldness in this thing, because he remembers, because of probably in the busyness of everything, he may have forgotten that this is exactly how it was to play out. His brothers would come and bow before him, and so he's now going forward with his testing with boldness. Some would think that it was vengeance, but I believe that Joseph did miss his family, and maybe it was vengeance, maybe it was, but from where I sit, and this obviously is just my opinion, because we do tend to form opinions around these things because we don't have all the information. For me, he's testing his brothers. He wants to know if whether there's any change or not. So look how they describe themselves, though, in verse 10 to 11. They said to him, "No, master, we're not spies. Your servants have just come to buy food," which is the truth. "We are all sons of one man," which is the truth. "We are honest men." Listen, maybe they're speaking the truth now, um, uh, because we can't freeze them in time, right? Uh, there's obviously, as this thing plays out, we do see changes in them. So maybe now they are honest men, but it's not how we would have described them a couple of chapters ago. Honest men don't trick a town into circumcising themselves and then show up and slaughter everybody. Honest men don't turn around and sell their brother into 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 slavery, and then tell their dad that alienate them. Honest brothers, don't sleep with their daughter-in-law, and honest brothers don't sleep with their stepmom. And yeah, so this is what they were, um, but has this experience changed them? This is how the brothers see it. In verse 21, the brothers said to each other, "We are clearly guilty for what we did to our brother." So this has been weighing on them all this time. Okay, they were young, they were rash, they did a stupid thing, but it has never left them. They saw how their father responded. They're filled with guilt, remorse. It's weighing on them. We are clearly guilty for what we did to our brother. It's not like a realization now, oh, what we did was wrong. No, they've been living with this in silence. We are clearly guilty for what we did to our brother when we saw his life in danger, when he begged us for mercy, but we didn't listen. That's why we're in this danger now. Okay, so they can be seeing that as judgment. Judgment has fallen upon them. What they did was a terrible thing. But we need to look at this and we need to see the correction that's involved with this, because we can come out with a terrible attitude that every bad thing that's happening to us is a judgment that's following on us. Dad is punishing us. And Dad doesn't punish us. Dad brings correction to us so that we can come out of that situation better than what we went into it. He wants us stronger. He wants us wiser. He wants us more mature. He's for us. He's not against us. So he will make us face the things that we do. And he will make us understand the impacts of those things. And he will help us to understand how that could have been better. So when we're in those situations again, we do it different. So that's how we need to see this. We need to see what this is, how this is going to play out, what the outcome is going to be. Okay. Just a side note here, just the fact of how this all ends, how they're afraid of Joseph at the end of this, that they consider this judgment and not correction. And I'm not sure that they ever move into a place of understanding that the Creator put them through this to correct them. I'm not sure that they come into that. I think Joseph did. I think Joseph understood that. But then again, Joseph has a more sensitive relationship with Yahweh, at this time, the Creator, than what his brothers did. Now, here's the thing. Joseph right away sees a different attitude. He hears a different attitude. When he was in danger, nobody would listen to him. When he begged for mercy, they laughed at him. But look now. Reuben responded to them. Reuben's the oldest. I'll just remind you, he's the one who slept with his stepmother. Reuben responded to them, "Didn't I tell you? Don't do anything wrong to the boy," which he did. In his credit, he tried to save him. But you wouldn't listen. So now this is payback for his death. Again, punishment is how he sees it. So Joseph is listening. They didn't know that Joseph was listening to them because they were using an interpreter. He stepped away from them and wept. Why? Because he can see the remorse. He can see the guilt. He can see that this has been weighing on them. He can see that they're no longer arrogant and flippant like they were. That what they did to him has really been weighing on them, and it touches him. That's why he wept. He's seeing the change. Yeah, here's the thing. Okay, this is just me pointing something out. Okay, When he returned, he spoke with them again. Then he took Simeon from them and tied him up in front of them. And again, this is now he's putting a brother in trouble, in distress, needing mercy, needing sacrifice, needing help. What are they going to do? Understand? But why Simeon? Out of all of them, why Simeon? I just want to take you back for a moment and consider who were the ones that came in and butchered the town. Tells us a little bit about them. It was Simeon and Levi. I believe Simeon is the oldest of the two. Levi was following Simeon's example. Simeon, um, if we can understand from that, he would have been the more violent. He would have been the more aggressive. He would have been maybe he's the one who actually tied up Joseph. Maybe he's the one who threw him into the cistern. Maybe this whole thing was his idea. Whatever. But I think Joseph may have maybe just enjoyed a little bit by choosing Simeon and tying Simeon up. And throwing Simeon into prison, into the cistern. Does that? I don't know. You think maybe there's something there? Why Simeon? But then you look. Joseph is cut from different cloth. I'm telling you, because of after all that they put him through. Look at this in verse 25. What do we see? Then Joseph gave orders to fill their bags with grain, to put back each man's silver into his own sack, and to give them provisions for their trip. And it was done. The kindness and generosity, because that didn't come out of the Egyptian treasury. I'll tell you that came out of Joseph's pocket. It was Joseph who ended up paying for the grain for the family. It was Joseph who gave them provision for the trip home. Kindness and generosity, staying true to form, staying to who God called him to be. There is a consistency in his character in everything that he's gone through. There's been refinement. There's definitely been refinement. There's been a polishing down, if you would, of the sharper parts. The arrogance isn't there like it was with his. I think there's a little more understanding. There's a little more sensitivity that's involved. And leadership can do that to you. Leadership will shape you and change you, and God is using it to shape him and change him. But the core of who he is in the Creator, who he is, hasn't changed. That kindness and that generosity is still there. And then your heart bleeds for poor Jacob. I mean, Jacob is innocent in all of this, guys. He is just like he hasn't been doing anything wrong. Although all his whole life, if you look at it, man, this guy has been pushed around and what do we find? In verse 36, their father Jacob said to them, "You've taken my children from me. Joseph's gone, Simeon's gone, and you're taking Benjamin. All this can't really be happening to me." Man, his children are so important to him. And these are the guys. You get it. Jacob has been suffering all this time because his sons sold Joseph and then lied to him, saying he was dead. He's been suffering all this time thinking that Joseph is dead. And now he sees Simeon gone, and they're asking to take Benjamin. And all the things that he's gone through in all his life, it's his children that he's holding on to. This is an important thing for me to underline for you because of what Reuben did. Okay, what Reuben did, and remember, Jacob didn't seem to do anything at the time. I mean, yeah, Reuben slept with his father's secondary wife, so really his stepmother. Reuben said to his father, "You You may put both of my sons to death if I don't bring him back to you. Make him my responsibility, and I will make sure he returns to you. Are you out of your flippin' noggin? You are talking to her grandfather, and you're saying to the grandfather, if I don't bring your son back, you can kill your grandsons. What? I mean, what planet do you have to be from to even come up with such a thing? But this is who Reuben is. Reuben is the oldest. He's rash. I mean, this doesn't make any sense. I mean, that's like, he's not even saying, hey, you can put me to death, Dad. He's not saying that. He's not saying, if I don't bring him back, Dad, you can take my life. No, he's offering up his own sons. I mean, oh, what kind of guy do you have to be? And Jacob just said to him, my son won't go down with you. There you go. My son won't go down with you because he doesn't trust him. Does not trust him. Slept with his wife, and now offering up his grandsons as collateral. Reuben's just thinking of his own stomach. My son won't go down with you because his brother's dead. That's on Reuben too, because Reuben's the oldest. His brother's dead, and he's been left all alone. If anything were to happen to him on the trip you were taking, you would send me, old as I am, to my grave in grief. Yeah, there is no trust there. There is no trust there, and we're going to see what happens in the next chapter about that. We'll just leave it as a cliffhanger, okay? Yeah, as if you've never heard the story before. Okay, so so glad you guys are on this journey. I keep saying that every day, but I really appreciate you, and this is good stuff. This is really good stuff, and I'm glad that you're going through this with me. It gives us some real good foundation here to understand how Israel got to that place. Anyways, all that sort of stuff. It's all good. You're going to learn so much from this. Take notes. Really highlight the things that stand out for you, and we'll just keep going. You guys be blessed. Have a wonderful day, and keep an eye out. Keep an eye out for what God is doing and for what He's saying to you. God bless.